partnership with cleveland.com, this is Capital Letter. As the White House talks about when and how to restart the economy and debate swirls around how much power it has to do so, governors, including Mike DeWine, are facing pressure at home to let businesses in some counties reopen. But will federal and local resistance to efforts to flatten the curve cause a resurgence of the virus just as states start getting things under control? Political reporter Seth Richardson is here now with more on this crucial decision facing state leaders. Seth, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start here. Mike DeWine has received a lot of credit for being one of the first governors to implement stay-at-home orders and other preventative steps to stop the spread of the virus. What is the pressure that he's now facing to reopen some parts of the state's economy?
Well, I guess in a way you kind of always expected this to happen, right? We've seen some of the pressure coming out of Washington as far as tweets and public statements by the president saying he wants to get things back open. Originally that date was Easter. Now, obviously, that date is blown by and was pretty quickly shut down by just about everybody. But now you are starting to see, a little bit of internal pressure from within the state. It looks like, House Speaker Larry Householder might not be quite as on board with some of DeWine's plan as other lawmakers are. And I mean, there has been a contingency that's showed up to the State House press conferences every day, kind of protesting the closures and, really wanting to get things back open.
Isn't this the case, though, Seth, that in many ways DeWine and Dr. Acton are becoming victims of their own success here? As the effort to flatten the curve starts to work, it gets harder for them to make the case that we still need to stay the course. Have they said anything about a timeline for reopening businesses?
Not as far as a hard date, but I do think you're kind of correct in them being victims of their own, success here, right? It's sort of like somebody telling you don't touch a hot stove. You don't touch a hot stove, but maybe you touch it 10 minutes later and it's not hot. And you're like, well, why did you tell me not to touch this stove? It didn't burn me. And I mean, you're going to see more of that come. And it's not, just from lawmakers or the public. You've got, a lot of conservative media entities are really going after it, too. OAN, the real far right channel that is kind of won't go there, but they've been putting stuff out, basically questioning the response and saying, well, how does any of this work if we're not seeing very many deaths? Now there is a possibility that the low infection rate and the really low death rate here is going to put some kind of pressure on the administration, though from my talking with people in DeWine's camp, he's really been able to kind of drown all that out because he's more concerned with saving people's lives and stopping the spread of the disease.
And it's certainly stopping a resurgence. Now, as you mentioned, that he is also facing, the governor, some pressure from the Trump administration and the president. Describe the balancing act that the governor has to do with Washington.
Well, it's interesting because on the one hand, there are all these kind of external statements coming from the president, right, talking about reopening and not voting by mail and just kind of going against really just, a lot of the things, at least, that Governor DeWine has said. Now, you saw in his press conference yesterday where he said that, they have a good relationship and they talk fairly often. And, by all indications, that does seem to be correct. I don't necessarily think that any pressure from the White House is really going to weigh on what Governor DeWine says, is going to do or not going to do, right? He's been relying on his health experts this entire time, and I don't see any reason that won't continue.
And when you look at the lower rates of infection and, thankfully, some lower death rates, although one death is too many, you certainly can see that the governor has a good case for staying the course. Seth, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Remember, you can access tomorrow's headlines today by subscribing to Capital Letter. Just go to cleveland.com/Capital Letter.